and don't think that it's an exaggeration, because almost everybody had domestic servants in those days. You see, the domestic servants lived in your home. They ate the food that you ate, and they had a very kindly and congenial home for themselves, food for themselves, and some pay, which wasn't very much, but it was usually sent to the family, to the elder parents.
We've just got to take a break now and change tapes. Interview with Rabbi Michael Mandel. This is tape 2. Rabbi, tell me about your 11 siblings.
I did not know all of them, for they were born long before I was born. I'm being the last one of the children of my parents. I understand that we had twins first, that is to say, the first wife bore twins. They died early. Then came a boy by the name of Moshe Adel, who bore my paternal grandfather's name. He died young, at the age of about 5 or 6 or something like that. Then came Yolan. Then came Monsi. Then, that's the 5 children of my father's first wife. My mother bore 7 children. The first one was Dutzi. The next one was Magda. The next was Lily. The next was Yankee. Next was Tubi. Next was Shindy. And then myself. I knew Lily. I knew Yankee. Lily, Yankee, Tubi, or Theresia, Shindy, or Erna, as she's known now. And that's it.
Were you close to any particular sibling?
I'm very close to my sister, who lives in Sydney, the only survivor. She was in Auschwitz, but she survived. She's tattooed. And she was born in 1923, in January.
Were you, as a child, were you close to any particular sibling?
I was very close with Theresia. You see, you asked me the question, who took care of the family? Who took care of me after my mother's passing? Well, my sister Theresia, or Tubi, who was only a few years older than myself, she died at the age of about 25 in 1945. So she was born in 1920. She was 8 years older than myself. She was 12 and a half when I was orphaned. And she went to a convent school at 8 o'clock in the morning, but before that she got up early in the morning she heated water for the wooden trough in which she gave me a bath daily. She dressed me. She prepared my breakfast. She prepared my play lunch. And then she went off to school.
Why did she go to a convent school?
Because my father insisted on the girls particularly to get the best education that was available. The only one that was available was in high school, the Catholic convent school, which was conducted in the Hungarian language, despite the fact that it was Romania. But they had the right to the language of instruction to be Hungarian. And all my sisters went there except the one that survived, because she, by that time, the law was changed or enforced that they had to go to a Romanian elementary school, and where the language of instruction was Romanian, and she had to go to that one. That was a state school. Next to it was the kindergarten where I was sent myself, where unfortunately I have had the misfortune to have a very, very cruel and very impossible kindergarten teacher who was so anti-Semitic that she found any excuse and every excuse to hit us, Jewish kids that had to go there. Soon after, my father took me out from there, and for a while I didn't go to any kindergarten, but then I went to elementary school soon after.
Do you remember your kindergarten teacher's name?
No, perhaps very vaguely I would recall, but I think it was Bochan, but I'm not sure.
Why would she hit you?
She was a very, as I said, cruel person, totally unsuitable to be a kindergarten teacher. She was very vain. She constantly seemed to be preoccupied with her looks, and I did not understand it at that time, but now on reflection I would think that she was a woman of not the first-class morals either. But she was a real anti-Semite.
Do you remember what she would say to you?
Yes.
With respect to the anti-Semitism?
Yes, "Purkat Židani," you dirty Jew, to a kid of 5 or something like that.
How many Jewish children in your class then?
At that time, only about 7, 8, something like that.
Out of how many?
Out of about 25, 30, or I don't know how many there were there, but there seems to be quite a full kindergarten.
Do you remember?
It was near the Romanian Orthodox Church, and on the other side was the church, and this side was the school and the kindergarten.
Do you remember if any of the children themselves voiced any anti-Semitism?
Children themselves made faces and grimaces and all that. But most of them, they were quite all right. They were quite all right.
Going back to your home life now, what sort of or tell me about your religious upbringing.
Well, my home was a very religious home, very observant in every way. We had, at the age of 3, my hair was cut. I had shoulder-length hair at the time. It was cut, and I had the side locks, the payas, At age 3, my father started, but soon handed me over to a cheder teacher for learning the Aleph base and learn how to pray, to daven. At age 3, I started my Hebrew education. Like every other child in my community, I was not in any way exceptional. That was the rule of the day. But then we learned, in Cheder we learned, I remember I went to a private little school, or rather a little class conducted by an elderly gentleman, about 8th or 9th house from us. Mr. Roth was his name, Roth Bachi.
Could you spell that, please?
R-O-T-H. There was it was a court, and there are 3 families lived there, and in the morning I went there, and for about 2.5 hours all told. That's how long it was for at my age when I started. Later on it was longer hours and so on. But then we had, after about an hour or so, we had the play lunch, which my late sister prepared for me. Not when I was 4, but afterwards, when I still went on to that one. Later on, we learned to pray, and the daily prayer, the Shema Israel, and so on.
What
but
about
strangely, I remember now, one of my domestic servants insisted before I could have my breakfast. She taught me, or she said it with me. She urged me on to say the Modeh in the morning, and Shema Israel before I went to sleep. It was Maria and Ludovica, both of them. Although they were Christian themselves, they were Romanian Orthodox, Romanian, or what they call Eastern Orthodox people, and very religious themselves, but they insisted that I say my prayer in Hebrew, and nothing was given to me until I first said my brachot. And that was because that's how it was instilled in us. But then I learned in the cheder, proper cheder, I went to where the Jewish day school was. In the court there were several things. There was the mikveh there. The mikveh, man and his wife, his family lived there on the premises, and they were looking after the mikveh, both for men and for women. The water came in from the river Krasna, K-R-A-S-Z-N-A, in Hungarian, spelling Krasna River. And there were the chadarim, the cheder where the teachers were teaching the children. And there was the ladies' synagogue, the ladies' part of the synagogue, the Weiberische Schule. That was in the Polish. That's where they davened Nusach Sfart. But my father davened Nusach Ashkenaz. Friday nights we used to go in the vicinity to just opposite the street, a few houses away from my place, from our place, and I learned the cheder. I learned Chumash, eventually Rashi, and at the age of 8 I was sent over to my uncle in Hungary, to Bützenmihai, and there I continued with my Jewish education. Cheder, and then Talmud Torah. That's where I learned Mishnah and Gemara. And at Bützel Mihai, my teacher was Moshe Ephraim Schwartz, who was the nephew of the great Rabbi known as Marshag, which is an abbreviation of Moreinu Rabbi Shimon Greenfeld.
Could you spell Moshe's last name?
Moshe Ephraim Schwartz. Well, in English I would spell it M-O-Y-S-H-E, Moshe, Ephraim, E-F-R-A-Y-I-M, Ephraim Schwartz. And Schwartz was that was his name. He married the daughter of Ben Zion Blum from Beret, Jewish fellow. He had 5 children, 5, Amram, Yehuda, Yecheskel, the girl, and Shimon. He had 5 children. One of them was not so bright, but the others were geniuses, each one of them, particularly Yecheskel. And Amram, the eldest one, was so good at his studies that at age 12 he was given charge of a class of 30-year-olds.
Going back now to your to Shimleol at home, after your mother passed away, did the family still have the Friday night dinners, Shabbos, at home?
Yes, it was prepared by my sisters with the help of the domestic help. And even then, my father would send me back if they didn't join us sort of on their own account, on their own bet. When we went to the synagogue, it was, as I said, in the vicinity. It was a private synagogue, rather in the private courtyard of a very rich man who had a brass foundry, Rezesh Weiss.
Was that his?
Weiss was a Jew.
Could you spell that, please?
Weiss, W-E-I-S-Z. One son, he had 2 sons. One son died, but the other one I spoke to last year in Petach Tikva, and he told me that I'm suffering from the beginnings of Alzheimer's disease. He said it himself. He was absolutely overjoyed when I contacted him. I cannot tell you what a mitzvah I did by contacting him. He remembered me so well, and the tunes that I sing on holidays, many of them are from that person, Brumi Weiss.
From the father?
No, not the father. The father was almost an ignoramus. But he insisted on having a synagogue so that his 2 sons never miss a minyan, morning and evening, never. There was no excuse. It was right in their yard. And that's where there was space for approximately 3 minyanim. People who lived in the general area used to come there. On the average, we had about 1.5 dozen people there on Friday nights. On Shabbos afternoon, we had, because he has always given a Shabbat Suda Shlishit, 3rd meal of the Shabbos, and used to be very, very well catered for. So several poor people who did not have very much at home came there and had generous helpings of cholent and other things as well. But anyway, Mr. Weiss, he was a great disciplinarian, quite generous, but an iron hand, a brass hand. Once he punished his son by hanging him by his head and giving him a good wallop because he disobeyed him. He talked back to him. And the wife was begging him not to prolong the agony. So eventually he did, but that son died, not on that account, eventually.
You said that the son, is it Bruni? What was the son's name that you saw in Israel?
Brumi.
Brumi.
Yes.
Could you spell that?
B-R-U-M-I.
You said that the songs that you know you learnt from him. And is this back in the early 30s, in his father's
Then
shul?
he used to come home. When I was away from 1936 to 1940, I was away in Lützen Mihai. But when I returned and I had my bar mitzvah there, and he used to come home for high holidays and for other festivals, and I particularly cherished the melody of Chol HaMoed, Sukkot and Pesach particularly. He used to sing it so nicely.
Could you sing some for me now?
The introduction is Baruch Hu es Hashem HaMevorach, Baruch Hashem HaMevorach, Le'olam Voed. Just a brief sample.
Were there any other particular tunes or melodies that you learnt back then that are...
Well, we used to sing on Shabbos afternoon at the Seudah Shlishit a number of melodies, and my father was always asked to give a little discourse on the weekly portion or something like that. Yes, there were some melodies that we had both at home and there as well.
Any favourites that you remember?
Yes, Menucha v'simcha oil Yehudim yom Shabbos yom Achmadim Shemra b'zochrav heimo meyidim ki l'shishokol v'ruyim v'yomdim Shemei shamayim eretz v'yamim kol tzmuran gevayim v'romim oy tanin v'yodam v'chayas v'yomim ki v'yo Hashem tzur oilomim.
What's that?
That's a melody that we sang actually on Friday nights at home, in my father's table. And at Shlashidus, it was Bevayoy meyadoy mechamez begodim tevach loy bevotzro vezebach loy bevoygedim, and so on.
Were those songs particular to where you lived, or were they used in...
The melody may be more or less, but it was quite general, because both in Semihai and even today in Sydney, the Adas Yisrael, they sing some of those melodies.
Tell me about Pesach.
Well, Pesach at home, of course, my father and my hometown Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Erharach, Zecher Tzadik V'Kodesh Livrocha. They were very great friends. In fact, my father was the borer, the assessor at the rabbinic court, an unpaid position, an honorary position. They were great friends, and they used to bake the matzahs, the mitzvah matzah. I remember my father and the rabbi were having a white sort of dust coat on them, the kittel actually. And they with rolling pins and so on. The water was brought the night before from the Krasna River in buckets, covered up, and also in what they call in Hungarian kupa. It's a sort of a jug, a blue enamel jug, I remember that. And they were taken to the place which was underneath the day school. It was in the mezzanine floor. Half of it was sunk down and we had to go down on steps, but that's where the ovens were. And in the same, that was in the same yard where, courtyard where the mikveh was, etc. But there were tables set up and the desks on which they did and they were singing Hallel. They were chanting from the book of Psalms, Psalm 113 to 118. They were singing songs whilst they were preparing the matzahs.
Did you help?
No, not at that time, no. I helped my father to distribute the matzah that was given to poor people. Poor people came along to my father. He was the community's, what they call the honorary secretary, but he was known as the Yedze, as the what should I call it in English? He was the honorary secretary, and he was given the honor of distributing the matzahs for poor people. They would come and he would ask them, how many people do you have in your family? According to the number of children and adults that were there. The packets were in very fresh paper, not butcher's paper, but brown paper, and that's where the fresh baked matzahs were packaged in, I think, in 5 kilogram packages, and so they were given to each one that came along without pay, of course. Those who were not able to pay, they didn't have to pay a penny. But those who had to pay, they bought it and they paid for it, and it was receipted and so on.
What preparations were done?
I helped in that one sometimes to take it down if, for instance, an elderly person came along, because the matzahs were distributed from the girls' school room. The girls' school room was emptied from the benches where the school benches were stacked in the corner and cleared, and some shelves were put in, and from there they took it down. So sometimes I helped with that.
What preparations were done at home for Pesach?
Everything, and I mean everything, was taken out from its place, dusted and swept and washed and cleaned and so to speak fumigated. Everything was taken out to the yard, and the things that were in the cellar prepared already in advance of Pesach, in the autumn or whenever it was, or in the late summer for the following spring, because Pesach is in springtime in my home.